Hello, everybody. Once again, I find myself in a very stressful week, and I was not able to finish Critter Miss as planned, so I decided to do a vlog to go over a topic that I really wanted to talk about, but I didn't think would expand to a full Critter Miss special. And the topic for today is how to deal with players not accepting failure. I think just about every DM, storyteller, GM is going to run into this a couple of times actually in a game. Like, everyone's going to run into it, but everyone runs into a game is that players do not like to accept failure. The idea of a role-playing game is that it should, at least in theory, mimic the real world, that the real world has consequences, that you have a series of acceptance, botches, failures, successes, what have you. And, you go about it the best that you can. In this case, you're taking the role of heroes or protagonists, and you're going about doing a thing, and it has a series of passes, successes, failures, so forth. Well, in this world, you can kind of, as a player, control your destiny, so to speak, with the dice rolls. And sadly, sometimes the dice rolls don't play out favorably for you. And the thing is that as a player and not as a person, you are aware that you have options. You have this sheet on this sheet in front of you that says that you have options. And everybody eventually does this at some point whenever they get a very ill-timed failure. Or maybe it's not even an ill-timed failure. Maybe they just don't like failure. Who does? But realizing that they have an opportunity to do other things will quickly pull out, every single thing that they can potentially justify in their mind to make rolls, which can get extremely tedious very fast. Let's take a couple of examples. The first one being what I like to call 1 fails, 5 line up to take the brunt. So let's say that you're in a group, once again, of 6 people playing a game of Dungeons & Dragons. And let's see, in order to get through the door or whatever, you need to make a charm check. You have to seduce somebody to get through the door. So you send up your most charismatic person, and they roll, and on this stage they got a 2. Well, now the other 5 are like, well, it's time for us to give it a try. Or better, before we even get to the other 5, the person's like, well, can I try again? Sure, you get maybe one more shot, I always think, and then suddenly they're asking 2 or 3 times. Okay, so you lock them out. Well, here comes the other 5, strolling up, ready to make the exact same save. And if you know anything about role-playing games, the whole purpose of a role-playing game is, or not the purpose of role-playing, the idea of how the crunch works is probability. So you roll a d20, you have about a 1 in 20 shot of rolling any specific number, not factoring in dice abnormalities or how you roll the dice. And then the idea being is that you set checks to it. So, if your check is a DC 10, you have to be a 10, you have a roughly 50% chance of getting a success. If it's 15, you have a roughly 25% chance, and that's if your modifier is 0. So it's all about increasing your odds of probability. So, especially whenever players, I think, either consciously or subconsciously know this, and realize that if eventually you get enough rolls, you'll get a success in something. And so, okay, here's a really good one. The term one might not have been the best example. Intelligence checks. I get this so much with intelligence checks on getting information. So let's say that you want to know about a spell in D&D. So that's, intelligence arcana, typically. Especially, intelligence realm arcana for 5th edition. I think, 3.5 had arcana and whatnot. Well, 3.5 had like 20 different knowledges, but either way. You have your wizard roll, the wizard fails. Okay, everybody else rolls, they fail. Now here is where things get a little bit more funky, is that, once again, don't like failure. So you start thinking, well, what about knowledge history? technically, it kind of makes sense to me. I mean, spells and whatnot are in historical context, so they roll that. Doesn't get it. Okay, well, what about knowledge local? That was in 3.5. You're starting to dive into, and I've had people go through every knowledge in the book justifying how certain things will fit into that category just because they don't want to fail. They want to know the information, especially if they know it. If the person knows, the idea of meta-knowledge is it's a subject you should not do in order to get the most enjoyment out of the game, but I can tell you this, if you know the answer as a person and your character doesn't know, I can guarantee you are going to break that at some point. Because it's going to drive you nuts knowing that it's in your head, and you'll even say, I know it, but my character doesn't know it. And that's whenever you start trying to justify every role imaginable to make sure you get the information that you need. So, as a storyteller, I think the idea is that you need to learn on where to draw the line. What is the point where you have to stop people and say no? And usually, it's up to many people. The way that I usually see it is that whenever players get a little rampant with, you know that they're no longer as a character trying to make a check, they are now as a player thinking of every conceivable idea that could potentially net them the result that they want. Eventually you just have to shut that stuff down. Eventually you just have to say, I'm sorry, you don't know. I don't care if your sheet says that you could potentially know. You have to stop and be like, you cannot know. You are a failure. Even if you rolled 19-6, let's say you're playing World of Darkness and you rolled 10 dice the next time, and they were all 10s, and it was perfect and everything. Doesn't matter. You don't know. You can never know. Because eventually, you could give them some leeway. I don't think that, it's a one check, one shot sort of deal. But you have to be aware of whenever the situation is starting to happen that this is no longer trying to gain knowledge or whatnot. This is no longer a character trying to see if they know something. This is a player irritated that they cannot have information that they know exists in this world and will look for any reason to justify knowing things. And there are times whenever eventually you're going to have to punish players, especially if, and this is the big one, I don't think that you should punish players, if they, if you eventually lock them out, be like, listen, you've tried enough, this has gone too far. If they refuse to accept that answer, I think that's the point whenever punishment becomes a likelihood. And I don't usually advocate for player punishment, especially because it opens up a door for more, I'm going to say, sadistic DMs to justify, hey, I can do whatever I want with these players. I can torture them. I can, they must play my game, which is not the case. But there is a time whenever players do need to sometimes be sort of put in their place. And namely, it is whenever they have become obstinate dealing with situations of roles, dealing with not having information. So, that's about the extent of this conversation. Is in role-playing games, you are always going to have a situation in which players fail at a check, and they're going to be irritated, and so they know, either consciously or subconsciously, that the laws of probability say that eventually they will get a success. If they keep rolling, if they keep justifying. So they will do everything in their knowledge to justify getting another roll, to get another chance for success. And if they fail, they have about 5 of their party members who, if they can, will justify making the exact same roll. That way the party eventually gets the information. So, or the desired result. So once again, as a storyteller, just be wary that these situations creep up, and you need to be able to sometimes finally put your foot down and say, no, you have failed at this task, your group fails at this task, bad things are going to happen. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. Next week, I will have the Critter Mist that was supposed to be up today, which was Thieves World. So, you have something to look forward to on Tuesday. Thank you all so much. Have a good one.